today I wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to, as an industry, how not only do we navigate these changes that have already happened, that we've known they're going to happen for months now, but how do we do it in a way that makes sense for us to be able to articulate this to our clients? And also, for us to be able to do that, we got to know first off by ourselves why this is important and how it's beneficial. I think there's a lot of mistakes or a lot of misconceptions out there of what this is. From right from the very beginning, and I even see it now. There's a lot of people that are like, "Oh, well, how do we as a brokerage, or how do we as a team or a person, am able to share with the other agents the commission that my seller's willing to offer, so that they could, be incentivized or motivated to bring their buyers to the table." I think, for us to be able to have that conversation, let's take a step back and realize what's the conception that people have, customers have about us. What do they think when they think of agents? Sorry, guys. When they think of agents, what do they think? What do they think about us?
Shady,
Say it again.
like shady.
Okay, they think we're shady and unethical. Okay, what else?
We make too much money.
Okay, we're overpaid. What are the thoughts that they do?
We're all selling sunset agents.
Okay, like they have this perception that we're all making a crap ton of money and, we're doing all that stuff. Okay,
We all do the same thing. Agents are all the same.
that all agents are all the same. And what is that? What do they think agents do?
They think our
Nothing.
job is
Nothing.
easy, that we just open doors.
That's right. Literally, like the thing that I hear most often is that people feel like we are just door openers. That all we are is the gateway for them to be able to open that door so they can go inside. That's all we're good for, nothing else. And those that have been around the block for a while, that have done a ton of transactions, do you guys believe that that is a correct statement or a correct belief? Now, who's done a transaction where it's been like so simple and easy where you felt guilty for the money that you made? Anyone? Yeah, we've all been there, right? We've all had those super smooth, easy transactions. Who's been in a nightmare transaction as well that literally like took a couple of years out of your life? Yeah, we've all been there too. And you have the whole gamut, don't you? And same thing, like when you go to an attorney, sometimes attorneys have a very simple, easy case. It's a slam dunk. And sometimes they got to fight for their money. And it is the same way. Byron Lazine posted a video that I shared that I thought, yeah, there's so many people that feel like us as agents are going to go extinct, that we have no value, or there's not enough value that people would use us, especially with everything that's going on. It's going to be very simply put where agents are no longer going to be, needed, and therefore we're going to go extinct. And that's also not true. Now, I do believe that there'll be a lot of agents that do not have value to bring to the table, that they will leave the industry, that we will have a consolidation to some degree. I don't know how big that will be, but you'll have some degree of consolidation just because there's a lot of people that are agents that don't do anything anyway, right? I mean, I really wish that we could just eliminate them. We say, hey, if you haven't sold at least, however many homes, like we can come up with one number that if they haven't sold at least that many homes, that they just immediately lose their license or goes to probation or something, right? Like that'd be so great if that was the case, because then our true numbers would shrink to a more, legitimate number. The only reason that NAR doesn't do that is because they love collecting that check from getting that person to be able to renew their license for another 2 or 4 years or whatever that is. Anyway, I'm digressing. So let's go back to what this is all about. If I were to summarize this, I would say it's all about transparency. It's all about transparency. Now, for a long time, I had this hallucination that it was very transparent. But I realized that the thing that was truly transparent was the listing side of a transaction. When we go to someone's home and that we were going to list their property, the commission that we charged them was very black and white, wasn't it? Right? It was, this is what my fee is. And if we agreed upon that, which was completely negotiable, then very easily does the seller know exactly what they're going to be paying us. And for a long time, what we did is we got that total commission, and we chose to share that commission either completely in half or some variant of that with other agents in our marketplace, so that they would also be incentivized to bring a buyer to the table. And that worked great for a while. But what what was difficult about that is that it wasn't transparent from the buyer side. Now, who believes that that is a true statement, that there was no transparency on what a buyer's agent truly made from a buyer's perspective? Yeah. Would anyone like to articulate, like, why do you believe that that's a true statement?
I just want to jump in here because when I started in real estate 22 years ago, my state did not have buyer agency. We only represent, all agents only represented sellers. And like, that's where it comes from, right? Because everyone traditionally always represented the seller. So when we changed over to buyer agency and agents are representing buyers, it was a nightmare transition because agents were like, I can't believe that you would represent a buyer. Like, why would you do that? So when they changed over that buyers were now going to have access to representation, they never changed the way agents were paid. And even though I've always done buyer agency contracts and the commission was in there, the buyer never had to think about it because the payment still came from that old model of everyone represents the seller.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like, in an essence, the seller was paying to have another brokerage negotiate against them, right? That's virtually what they're doing. And so, that didn't make any sense, did it? It made sense if you look at it from the perspective of, oh, me as a brokerage that has a listing, I'm sharing in my commissions with somebody else so that they could bring an offer to the table. But it ultimately, what it became is that based on what that percentage was, it motivated or it dissuaded a buyer's agent to bring a buyer to the table. Now, what has changed in the last 15 years when it comes to how buyers find property? When I first got in the market and bought my first home, there was no MLS. I mean, I literally feel so old saying that, but there was no MLS. You would go to a brokerage, and the bigger the brokerage, the more opportunity you had. And you'd literally have to go from brokerage to brokerage and say, hey, what do you guys have available for sale? And then they would go through this book and they'd show you all the, properties they had for sale. And if, whatever the price range it was and location it was, like, it was so antiquated and it was so frustrating for a buyer to be able to find a property that way. And that's why for sale signs were super important too, because that's how people would also see, oh, that home's actually for sale. They would go to it because of that sign. Now, at the end of the day, when that happened, when a buyer was able to go directly to a broker that had a bigger, bigger listing pool, that gave them more opportunity. Now that's gone, right? How do buyers find properties now? Is it through their agent? Majority of the time, it's not.
Zillow.
Online.
It's not. It's a different online platform that they're able to find listings. Now they could theoretically, type in homes for sale in XYZ city, and one of our websites through, either organically or paid ad, they can come to our website directly, which is great. And if our website's good, then they'll be able to just stay there and look for properties there. But for the majority of the population, they're going to these, websites that are not owned by us, right? They're owned by Zillow, Realtor.com, Trulia, whatever, some other site. And they come to us as agents, or they come to agents and they say, hey, I saw this property on Banana Street. I would like you to show it to me. I'd like to see it. Or on that website specifically, they'll say, I'd like to see this home. They think they're contacting the listing agent, but they're actually contacting a Zillow Premier agent, aren't they? Or if you paid for that feature, you get that list, you get that lead. And we'd have to, for a long time as agents, we had scripts and be able to tell them, oh, well, no, I'm not the listing agent for the property, but I'm a Zillow preferred agent and I can show you, and we try to deliver a value why they should use us instead of going directly to the listing agent. And that's its own separate conversation. The bottom line is that buyers would go directly to, they want to go directly to the listing agent because they felt like it would just be the easiest thing to do, but they would know which properties they saw that they wanted to see. In fact, the very last home that I sold, I wasn't even there when they first saw the property. They were just driving by. They saw a home that was for sale listed, and they went and knocked on the door. I didn't tell them to do that. They just did it themselves because that's just the type of person that they were. They walked in, they negotiated the offer with the seller directly. Like, the agents were like not even involved in the negotiation of the offer. And they just told us, hey, this is what we want written up. And that's what we wrote up. I mean, things happen differently now. We continue to evolve. The point I'm making with all of this very long, elaborate story is that buyers do not need us as agents to find them homes that are already on the multiple listing service. Now, you put that aside, can we bring them other offers, or can we bring them other opportunities?
Yeah.
Heck yeah, right? Absolutely. There's lots of homes that are not on the market, pocket listings that are not advertised, that we have access to. And that is one of our value propositions as an agent that we can bring to the table. But at the end of the day, you could see why very clearly a buyer might feel that the only value that we bring to the table is that we will open the door for them. We are a door opener. And the states, and some of the states that you guys are in, where agents don't even write the contract, it's all done by an attorney. Even more of a reason why they're like, why do we even need you? We just go directly to the attorney to write up the contract. And so when it comes to that, we have to have more of an understanding of what our true value is of being a buyer's agent. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that if we cannot solve that problem, if we cannot, as agents, in representing buyers, articulate our value proposition to them, we will fail. If you cannot very clearly and confidently deliver that message with clarity, you're going to lose. And us as an industry will lose if we cannot teach that and help people understand that. So now let's go back to the commission structure. The commission structure has changed. The sellers are no longer obligated to pay a buyer's agent. And therefore the commission structure that or the compensation they're going to be offering, for the most part, is going to be directly to the listing agent that has the job of marketing their property, negotiating on behalf of the seller. The responsibility of compensation to the buyer's agent rests on whose shoulders?
Buyer.
That's right. Lands squarely on the buyer's shoulders. It's their responsibility. It's their responsibility to hire a buyer's agent. It's their responsibility to interview buyer's agents, pick the best one that they feel is competent that represent them in the purchase of their next home. And then when they go look at houses, that buyer's agent that has that buyer broker agreement with that buyer does not have to worry about what compensation they're going to get. Who's ever been in a situation before you had a buyer that you're representing and you showed them multiple homes, and the home that they end up absolutely loving is the one that paid the least amount of commission? Who's ever had that experience before? And what did you do in that scenario?
Eat it.
You're like, dang it. All right, fine. All right, freaking offer. And you hated it, right? Because as a buyer's agent, you're like, I'm doing the same exact work in selling this house that's paying the lowest commission out there compared to this other home that would have paid a lot more. Same paperwork, same, process. This one's just paying a lot less. And so we're in the beck and call of what the buyers or what the seller or the selling listing office was willing to offer us. And that's really frustrating. So I want you to think about how exciting this is that you, as a buyer's agent, if you choose to work with a buyer, you get to call the shots. And I know some of you guys are already like in this type of market where that is the case, but majority as a whole nationwide, that has not been the case. We have been at the mercy of whatever's offered on MLS. And if you try to ask for more, you were shady, weren't you? Like if the offer was, let's say the home was listed for $1 million and the compensation that was offered was, I'm just arbitrarily going to say 1%. And you're like, wait a minute, dude, I want at least 2.5. The purchase contract had nothing to do with the buyer's compensation or the buyer's agent's compensation, right? It had directly to do with a buyer and a seller. It had nothing to do with you. And so you'd have to have this weird, funny conversation with the listing agent and then the seller. And then you're trying to figure out how to do it with the buyer. It was super awkward, wasn't it? I'm sure you guys have all been there. And at the end of the day, you trying to squeeze more from the seller is doing what?
Making the buyer's offer weaker.
Not only is it making the buyer's offer weaker, it's taking money from them. Because if the seller was willing to offer you an additional $10,000, then theoretically the buyer would be like, hold on, wait a minute, that should be given to me, not to you. And so this agreement, everything that's going on right now, the changes that are happening in our marketplace is making it to where it's very clear. There's no mystery, there's no cloud and smoke, there's no confusion about who is getting paid what and who is representing who. And now, for the very first time ever, we can say as a buyer's agent that we work exclusively 100% for our buyer and nobody else. And we are also putting their needs always, always, always above ours. And if you can't do that as an agent, independent of what brokerage you work for, I would respectfully ask you to leave this industry. And so going back to what we've talked about as far as the compensation, you get to be in charge now. You get to be in charge of what you are offering as a compensation or a fee to that buyer. And then they're agreeing with you by signing a buyer broker agreement. So you already have that contract signed, right? You get the buyer broker agreement, you're super excited. Now you get to show them property in confidence because you don't care if they buy it for sale by owner anymore. You don't care if they go wherever, because at the end of the day, you have a contractual obligation with them or they with you that they're going to pay you a certain amount based on, you know, the transaction taking place. So us as agents, when we have that information, and tell me if you're being honest, raise your hand if you, when your MLS system eliminated buyer compensation, it freaked you out just a little bit in the inside. Just like it was just a little, unnerving. Come on, like it should have impacted everybody. Like it was for me, even like I was like, oh wow, I can't even see what's being offered anymore. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter because now I have, when I do work with a buyer, I have that already agreed upon. I already know what I'm going to make. Now, it could be a percentage that's dictated to the purchase price of the home they buy. That could be a small variable, but for the most part, I know the percentage I'll make. I don't have to rely on the seller. So let's talk about how we negotiate this. When you call a listing agent, let's say you showed a home to your buyer, and you call a listing agent and you say, hey, tell me a little bit more about your sellers. How motivated are they? What are they looking to go to? What is the reason why they're selling? What's the lowest they're willing to accept? You ask them these types of questions and you try to get as much information and you try to pull as much information as you possibly can from them, don't you? We all do that. Because then with that information, it arms us to know how to properly negotiate and write an offer that's going to be best for our buyers. And who's been in a situation before in the past that you have asked for closing costs for your buyers? Raise your hand. Okay, hopefully all of you guys have, right? You've at some point in time worked with a buyer that needed some closing costs. Either you've had to do where you've, whatever the list price says, you had to go above list price and ask for closing costs. Or based on the market that you were in, if it was a buyer's market, like it is in some areas, where you went in way under list price and still ask for closing costs, right? Craig, are you guys doing that now? Are you seeing that where people, and even before this change, have you seen where agents are making offers on property under list price and still asking for concessions?
Absolutely. Yes.
All day long, right? That happened all day long when the market was, especially when it was like a crapshoot back in 2006, 7, 8. And so where we're at will determine where we live and the price points in which we work. Just like how that buyer had need of closing costs, in moving forward, most buyers will want closing costs. When we think of a buyer's expenses in buying a home, what are the main key expenses that they have when they buy a house? The obvious one is their down payment, right? That's the obvious. What are they putting down? Now, if they're a VA buyer, that's 0. That's the lowest they can put down, but they can put down 3.5% for an FHA, or they can put down 3% for conventional loan, 3, 5, 10, 8, 20, 22%. There's no specific number, but obviously there's benefits to putting down more. So aside from that down payment, what else do they need?
Lender's
Mortgage
fee,
cost.
title fee.
Lender fee, title fee. Trey, what were you saying?
I said mortgage costs, all the costs associated with the mortgage. If they're
Yep.
not
And
capped.
we could even dissect the mortgage costs into appraisal, processing fee, underwriting fee, lender fees,
Credit report.
Yeah, credit report, home inspection, appraisal, there's a lot of costs that a buyer has in buying a home, right? Title fees, escrow fees, attorney fees, if you guys are in an attorney state, right? There's so many different costs that a buyer has to incur up and above their down payment. Now we are putting an additional expense on top of them by saying that you are now responsible for our fee in representing you in buying this home. And so that, that could vary from whatever percentage you charge, right? And that is a completely and utterly negotiable item between you as an agent and the buyer. And so, when you lump all those fees together and you eliminate the down payment, that percentage of their fees could still range between 2 to 6%. So when you think of when you call a listing agent, a lot of us have been trained to now, just in the last little bit, to say, well, what are you offering? Is the seller offering any commission to me as a buyer's agent? And if so, how much? Like, agents have this mindset that they need to know what compensation they're being offered by the seller. Can you see how short-sighted and how selfish that sounds? I know that's what the norm is, right? I know that was the norm, and that's how you think you'd overcome the changes that have taken place. But I want to invite you guys to change your mindset. I want you guys to be open-minded, that you think about your buyer only and not you. Because the agreement, the negotiating about your compensation has been done way before you stepped foot into that home that they're buying. Your compensation's already been done, taken care of. So now when you go to negotiate, you're negotiating exclusively on behalf of the buyer, period. You guys all agree? So then when you ask to see if the seller is willing to offer any money, I want you guys to eliminate the word fee or compensation or commission out of your vocabulary. I want you guys to change it to, what are, if any, concessions is your seller offering to my buyer? Not to me, to my buyer, because you are negotiating, you as an agent are negotiating for the buyer from the seller. That's it. If you're going to ask that question of the listing agent, that is the question you're going to ask. What concessions are you offering to my buyer?
Nazar, I'll jump in real quick and say, but the buyer, the listing agent may be offering compensation to a buyer's brokerage. The listing agent may be offering compensation. I'm sorry, the seller may be offering compensation directly to a buyer's agent, or the seller may be offering concessions to the buyer, right? Those are our three categories, but it depends on how the listing agreement is written, which we in general won't have knowledge of under how it's kind of rolling out right now. I think it'll change, but right now, those are the three scenarios, right?
Right. Again, that's specific to your marketplace in Texas. And on a national level, that may not be the case. And I know it's really frustrating for everybody, because, from all different states and MLSs, we're all dealing with different types of ways in which everyone is interpreting these laws and these experiences that we're having. But at the end of the day, at its core, that's what's happening. Now, if the listing agent or the buyer or the seller, was offering any compensation to you, and you were no longer asking for that compensation from them, but you're asking a specific concession from them to the buyer, from their perspective, does it matter?
No, it doesn't. No.
It does not.
Yeah, Nazar, that's kind of what I was going to sprinkle on top there. Is I feel like a lot of this, it would be the same, offering concessions, offering the washer dryer, offering the fridge, offering a home warranty. The listing agent and the seller can decide what they do or don't want to share and what they do or don't want to offer. And at the end of the day, much like price, everything is up for negotiation, and everything needs to be written into the offer and very clearly explained, so that we are bringing the best and most competitive offer for our buyer to get the home that they want. So if we do or don't have those offers, in my mind, it almost doesn't really matter. It's kind of irrelevant. If they need closing costs, if they need seller concessions to cover agent fees, if they need a washer dryer or don't, like, that all kind of just depends on the offer that we're going to be putting together on their behalf, and trying to keep that as competitive as we can.
That's correct. So, Craig, the fear that I feel like you're expressing is, well, gosh, Nazar, if the seller was offering, call it 10% in commissions, right? I'm going to put some random number. And from that, they were willing to offer 5% to a buyer's agent. And we go and make an offer that's not asking for any buyer commissions to be paid by the seller. From the seller's perspective, what do they see? What's their bottom line?
Significantly higher net.
Correct. Right? Now, if that agent, that listing agent is gonna say, oh, you're not asking for any of it? Cool. If that's the case, then I'm gonna keep all of that. Now that's a lawsuit, right? I would absolutely take everyone to court for that. If that unethical seller listing agent did that, but they would not. They should not. And if they do, that's fraudulent, right? They would basically tell the seller, hey, Mr. Seller, we have this offer. This offer is not asking for any compensation to the buyer's agent directly, but they are asking for 5% in concessions from you as a seller to the buyer.
I think really where I come from on that is being able to inform my buyer beforehand what is being offered and who's it being offered to. Our MLS years and years ago, when we actually used to print out customer versions of the MLS and we'd go around and they'd have all the pages, it's not this way now, but years ago it did have what the cooperating compensation was so that the buyer could see it, right? And so if we've got our percentage in our buyer's rep agreement, and here locally, ours basically says, here's what I'm charging you, and we're first going to seek it from somebody else, but ultimately you're responsible for it, right? So if I'm walking into a house, I want to be able to tell them this one's offering 1%, whether it's any of the three scenarios that the money gets transferred to, is irrelevant, but they're offering 1. This one's offering 2. This one's offering 3. I think that is an impact on the buyer on their consideration on which home they're going to purchase, because ultimately they have to pay me what's in my buyer's rep agreement. So that's where I come from it is I think it's very important that we know what the structure of the payment is so that our buyers understand that on each listing.
And I'm going to argue that that should be irrelevant. And here's the reason why. Is because if the seller is advertising in any which way, shape, or form, any compensation that's being offered. Now, mind you, what does the law say now? That no seller concession or seller compensation to a buyer's agent can be advertised on MLS.
Right, on MLS, correct, yeah.
Why? Right, because they're trying to do away with all of this. Now, if the seller is offering compensation to you as a buyer's agent, does a buyer care? Because to them, it goes in the same pot. And let me explain. Again, we're taking lender restrictions. We're putting that to the side for right now. We'll discuss that. But if the buyer has a nut that they have to come up with, their down payment, closing costs, yada, yada, let's say that's a total of $50,000. And you find out from the seller in whatever sneaky way you find out that they're willing to offer compensation to you as a buyer's agent. And then you want to inform that to your buyers and have that be a determining factor if they see the house or not, is kind of ridiculous, because to them, they're like, I know that I have to pay you X percent, but I also know I have to pay all these people X percentages. And therefore that's great, but that's where you're here for, is to negotiate on my behalf, irrelevant of what the seller is willing to offer. Because if the seller's willing to offer 3 or 2 or 1 or half, whatever it is, but the buyer wants a heck of a lot more than that, right? Like at the end of the day, you have the seller's bottom line and you have the bottom or the buyer's bottom line. What the buyer needs to come up with to buy the home and what the seller's going to net when all the expenses are done. Does that make sense? And I hope that as an industry, we can see it that way so that we are no longer, because again, you guys, like when you look at a line item sheet on an expense column, you have credits and debits, right? You have expenses and money that you get. And we are all acknowledging that moving forward, that the commission paid to the buyer's agent or the fee is now in the expense column of the buyer. It's no longer an expense for the seller. And because of that, we should treat it that way, that they're completely separate. And any compensation that we get from the seller for our buyer based on our wonderful negotiating skills is going to reduce the overall expenses that buyer's going to have to come up with. Obviously, not the down payment, right? But all the other additional expenses they incur. So, Craig, to answer your question, if you find that out, or, you know, if you're told that, or whatever it is, like at the end of the day, you could say, hey, what are any and all concessions that a seller's offering? Right? If you want to be more vague that way. And, oh, yeah. Sorry, I needed to meet you, Rochelle. If they ask, or if you make it more vague and say, hey, any concessions that a seller's offering, if you want to ask that question, then you can go ahead and ask it that way. I think that's appropriate. And if they say, oh yeah, we're offering a buyer's comp at this, that's fine, right? But you're not necessarily breaking a rule there. But I want us as an industry, if we can, change the way in which we look at who gets paid what when, then the way in which we communicate with and how we negotiate against becomes a lot more easier and clear, because we're not now trying to negotiate our self-worth and the buyers and trying to figure out who's going to pay what. We just know that the buyer's going to pay us. That's who our client is. And we're going to go, you know, like just like an attorney would, right? An attorney would say, hey, I'm going to sue you. And when I win, you're not only going to pay me this, but you're also going to pay for my attorney fees. Same concept here. Okay, let's field some questions.
So, so for us and for going forward with our agents, I think an important thing to focus on in your, buyer consultation is really helping the buyer think through the possibilities they could be facing X, whatever X is. So help them think through worst case scenario, just like a net for a seller would be working your net in at worst case scenario, because we think most agents will come and their buyers will want to have some, some assistance with that, some concessions possibly. So here's worst case, but with your buyers, sitting down in your consultation and helping them think through, in the event, Mr. Buyer, that you are having to take on that expense yourself, where are you at financially? Is there an option for you maybe to tap into a 401k, or let's talk to a lender to see if there's a possibility of premium pricing, or maybe even a gift money from a relative to offset closing cost. So in the event you're having to also pick up, the fee for me to represent you, you have a clear understanding of what you really need as we start the negotiations. Because it could vary from house to house as to what a seller is willing to pay in concessions. So if they're not clear what they can afford to do, I think they need to know that up front.
Okay, let's play a little game here. And I appreciate what you're saying, and I agree. Let's play a game. Home is on the market for 1 day. You call the listing agent and you find out that there's been 35 showings in 1 day. You ask them if they have any offers. They say they have 10 offers in hand, another 2 coming. Your buyer needs closing costs. The list price is $500,000. Your buyer needs closing costs. Are you going to have a shot at that home?
It's unlikely if you're needing to pay concessions for your broker's fee as well as your closing cost as well.
You could,
Unless you offer over
they need-
asking.
If
If
they
it all
need to stay
plays.
in the house for a certain amount of time and no one else is willing to do that, maybe workarounds.
Yeah, you guys, listen, in that scenario, and let's say we're in a hot, crazy market where like everyone is, there's no inventory, any home that hits the market, it just is bananas crazy. And we're in this new life where all buyers agents are paid by the buyer. And everyone's gonna be asking for closing costs to some degree. At the end of the day, which offer is the seller gonna accept?
One that nets them the most and has the terms that they want as well as the net.
Bingo. The price, the net to them, they can care less. Like if I told you, give me $5 million, that's my fee, but in turn, I'm going to give you $10 million. Would you pay my $5 million fee? Unless you're a complete doofus, yes, you would, right? If it was guaranteed. People don't care about the cost of something. They care about what they're going to get, right? The net to them. And so in this scenario, when there's multiple offers and everybody's asking for closing costs, the seller's going to look at them and put in a hierarchy of the net to them, the strong or the strength of that buyer, right? Are they a buyer that's putting 3% down? Or are they a buyer that's putting 30% down? And they're going to look at the terms. Does the term say we're gonna close escrow in 21 days and give you a 2-week rent back? Or does it say we're gonna close in 45 days and we're hoping and praying that we get the money from our foreign country to come over and so we can buy the home? Right? Like, they're gonna check to see who's gonna give the best offer, the best terms, and that's what they're gonna accept. And if the market was to where average days on the market was 95 days, no offers on the table, haven't had a showing in 3 weeks, not because the home is ugly, just because the market's soft, and you've got a strong, nice buyer in your hands, and you go make an offer on that property, what type of offer are you gonna make? Right, you're gonna make an offer that's strong, under list price, asking for all the concessions, the best terms, right? The highest amount of contingency timeframes. You're gonna ask for everything under the sun. And guess what? If the seller's desperate and motivated enough, they're gonna accept your offer. Nothing's changed, you guys. The market dictates what the seller's willing to get or what the seller's willing to accept and what the buyer has to pay, or the other way around. Jessica.
So we've already experienced this because we've been asking the buyer to cover our different for years and years now. So before the pandemic and the market going crazy, that was a no-brainer. Yes, the seller concessions would cover it, but when the pandemic hit and the market went crazy, we had to have that conversation with our buyers, and 9 times out of 10, they just would say, "We'll just pay it. Don't even ask." You know, when you're in that, when you're in, and it wasn't scary. It's not scary. They understand.
Yep. So again, that's exactly the same example. The only difference is, I would say, you're not saying, hey, they're not willing to pay my fee, and therefore you're gonna have to pay it. You're gonna say, hey, they're only offering this, or they're offering nothing to buy this home because they have 20 offers on the table.
And that's what we would say, because it's always, this is how much they're willing to pay towards our fee, your buyer brokerage fee, because they know that the buyer brokerage fee with us is X%. And that's what we say, this is how much they're willing to pay towards that fee.
Right. Again, but now moving forward, I want us to be able to separate, and instead of saying, hey, we found out that the seller is willing to offer X or nothing, just say, hey, the seller is willing to offer this or nothing towards your closing costs.
Or towards concessions. Here's the total amount towards concessions. You can use that, Joe, however you choose to. We just need to know that your obligation to us is X. And so out of this concessions that they're willing to do to accept your offer, the difference, then you'll have to come up with the delta.
And see, like, and Tammy, I wouldn't even bring that up. Like, they're not, you know, unless you're dealing with someone that's just a little bit slow and needs a little bit more handholding. Like, most people understand what their nut is, right? Because if you give them a net sheet and you say, this is how much money you need for your down payment and your closing costs. That's a lump sum. The buyer's gonna be like, okay, cool. I need to come up with however much money. They already know this. Now, then we say, well, you know, we can see based on the market that we're in, based on the home, based on the demand for that house, and how long it's been on the market, how motivated the seller is, we're going to get, if we can, as much as we can from the seller to pay and offset the cost of your down payment or your closing costs. Not your down payment, but your closing costs. And it's just that simple. Like, our fee is already included in all the other fees that they have to incur. There's no reason to separate ours from the rest. It's all together. They're all expenses that the seller or the buyer needs to pay.
I get it. That makes sense. I love it.
Because then you're not the bad guy, right? You're like, hey, these are, and I don't think we need to apologize either. Like, we don't need to say, hey, I'll try to see if I can get the seller to pay my fee. No, this is your expense. You're an adult. This is your fee. And we'll see what we can get for you to cover as much or none of your fees. And in fact, we might be in a market where if there's crazy amount of offers, you're going to go 100,000 above list price. And not only are you going to not pay your fee, you might offer to pay their escrow, their title, their this, their that, right? We've all been there as well. I'm assuming you guys have, where the buyer's paying for all of the fees that the seller may have had. So that's why it's all negotiable. And if we just separate those two, make it super simple for everyone to understand, then we as agents could no longer be, you know, in jeopardy of or be accused of putting our needs before our sellers or our buyers. Ben.
Yeah, so on that, question for you is, in Arizona, I know every state's different. We have that seller comp addendum where the seller can pay us directly. So should we instead just be doing it seller concessions to the buyer so that all those fees get lumped into the buyer? So it's that conversation that you just had is more clear, and it's like, hey, this is just a buyer fee. This is just part of it. So it doesn't separate out that seller compensation.
Like, if I can snap my fingers and change how everybody thinks, that's exactly what I would say would be the ideal scenario for everybody moving forward so that everyone understands. Now, the only caveat is, and I think this will change, but the caveat is the loan that they're getting says that the seller can only contribute 6% in total contributions from the seller to the buyer, right? And the buyer needs more than that. And so in that scenario, if we have to like separate it and say, hey, well, we're going to have this line item go from you to the seller so that we don't pass that threshold, that'd be the only reason why I would think that there'd be any separation between our expenses and their expenses. But beyond that, and most people are not going to get to that point, I think you would do yourself a disservice trying to separate yourself, because then you put even more light on your fee, right? Versus this is just an expense. Because the sellers don't, or the buyers don't complain about the title and escrow and lender fees. I mean, they might complain about it, but it's like, it is what it is, right? And if you have already gone through the emotion, gone through the negotiating your own self-worth with that buyer, then like, why bring that up again? It's just there. They know it, you know it. Now you're just trying to get as money as you can for the sellers, or from the sellers to the buyer. I want to hear from people that haven't spoken. Amber here, you look like you're concerned about what I've said. So can you unmute yourself and tell me your thoughts?
I'm concerned, but of course, it's a lot to take in, but, because I got a seller right now that I want to start selling in April, then May, and now I want to sell in August the 17th. So she's going to be, do I keep her or do I not keep her?
What do you mean?
Well, she's going to be hard. She's adamant about not paying nothing. I mean, I'm talking, yeah,
That's great.
it's going to be a challenge.
She's willing to pay you, but not anyone else.
Correct.
Cool. So watch. That's just like saying, having a seller that says, I'm going to list my house for $800,000. I don't care if the market says it's worth 750. I want 800 and that's it. You as a listing agent are going to decide, is that an actual motivated seller? Or are they just like, high in the sky, just wishing, throwing something against the wall, see if it sticks. Right. And so, or they might change their tune, because if you really know that they have a job transfer that to move, or they really hate that house for whatever reason, then they might tell you, I'm not paying anything, anybody. And that home sits on the market for 2 months. And the only offer you get is a buyer that asks for X amount in concessions. Then that seller has a decision to make.
Yeah. I thought of that too. It's either help or just it might sit. And if it sits, then we'll help.
Yep. Again, like, we can change this around and not talk about from the seller or listing side when we have that conversation with the seller. But I think it's easy to also say it that way. Like, instead of saying, hey, you no longer are responsible to pay the buyer's agent. Good news, right? Your total commissions are going to be whatever I charge you and what we agree upon together. Yay. Just also know that most buyers, when they go buy a property, they have this expense, this expense, this expense, this expense, this expense. And here's a generic net sheet of what their costs are going to be in buying the home, up and above their down payment, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller. And so just so you know, in today's market, everyone's working their tail off to try to save as much money as they possibly can to even get their down payment down, let alone all these additional expenses in buying a home. So either the demand for these homes are going to drastically drop, or they may ask for you to offset some of their closing costs, not commission, closing costs that they need to buy this home.
Makes sense. I'm gonna work it.
You go for it. You do it. I believe in you. Anyone else have any thoughts, questions, concerns about?
I have a question kind of regarding, trying to shuffle things, with the buyers coming in, if they're not necessarily cash rich. So they're coming in, having the finance. If it's a listing for 750, as long as it appraises, offer them 760, but they buy down the buyer's interest rate half a point or something like that. Does any of that change regarding these IPCs?
Nope. It
All
doesn't.
states, I mean, it's all still fair game. It's all still going to play out the same.
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean,
it's just a matter of making it work for everybody. Good business is all parties leaving happy. So
nothing changes when it comes to our negotiating on behalf of the buyers based on what their needs are. Right? If you got a VA buyer that isn't going to pay anything, right? Like, and like they finally amended to where there can be closing costs, but like if you got someone that's FHA, first time home buyer, has no money, and guess what? If they go and make an offer on a property that is, unfortunately, the first time home buyers like the same type of homes or can afford the same type of homes that who else likes?
investors.
That's right. Investors are in the same buyer pool as those first-time home buyers are, which sucks for the buyer, but investors, that's what makes sense for them. That's what pencils out, right? And so if you're competing with a cash investor and you've got an FHA buyer, doesn't matter if you ask for 2% or 10% in closing costs, the seller's gonna look at the bottom line and be like, this is cash king, close in 10 days, and you want me to accept your 45-day escrow and asking for yada yada? See ya. Right? And the buyer's not gonna be able to buy that home. It's just that simple. You move on to the next. Like, is this as clear to you as it is to me? Like, does anybody have like any, Nazar, I don't know. This feels like it's, I have some questions still. Because I really would love to be able to make sure that we all feel like we could be on the same page.
I
Independent
feel
of,
like it's going to work out beneficial to there's a part of me that feels like it's beneficial to it could be beneficial to all parties depending on how you present it. I've been doing FSBO incentive sheets because now more than ever agents are preparing their buyers to pay their own commission. That's great news for a FSBO. That's half the reason they got into the FSBO game.
Yeah.
For with the buyers, for us as agents, we are setting our own commission. We are deciding what we get paid. That's a win for us. In terms of, the buyers, they're going to need a good agent, and putting yourself and showing your value proposition is, it's a win in our books. I mean, it's all about how you look at it and how you're geared to approach it. I think it could be beneficial if you kind of look through the loopholes, I should say, or look at the positive, bright side.
that's it, David. Robert, you had a comment?
No, I mean, I think, look, we don't know how this is going to shake out. I think the one thing that we're focusing on above and beyond what you said, I mean, I do agree to a certain degree around most of the stuff you talked about. I think from my perspective, I'm going to be pushing a lot more to find like I'll talk to the buyer and I'll say, hey, listen, this is the fee that I charge and you get us exclusively and we're going to take care of you and all the great stuff that we do. But I still believe that the majority of sellers will be offering some type of commission for the agent. And I think it's our job to let the buyer know, like, hey, listen, this is my fee. And my goal is to negotiate this fee to be paid for through the transaction by the seller so that it's not a burden on you. Because the biggest issue we're dealing with is affordability, especially in my market. I'm sure everybody to some degree is dealing with affordability because it's all relative. And so it's like, hey, listen, this is the commission that we're going to agree that you're going to pay me. But there's a very high probability that I'm going to be able to find a way to negotiate it in the contract and our offer to get the seller to pay for it. So it won't be a burden on you. And if for some reason I'm unable to negotiate this commission in the contract and have the seller pay it, then you and I will get together and discuss strategies on how we can make it happen, since the burden will be on you, versus just saying, hey, you're paying me no matter what, and I'm going to negotiate for you. I think we're talking a lot around how we're going to have the seller still alleviate that burden for the buyer, but we haven't done this enough to really understand how it's going to shake out. And me saying, I think most sellers are going to pay the commission is potentially short-sighted, right? I mean, no one really knows what's going to happen. So my thinking is going into this with one strategy, like this is the way I'm going to do it, I don't think is the right move. I think we need to all keep an open mind around it, right? The buyers need to keep an open mind. we as the buyer's agents need to keep an open mind. The listing agents need to keep an open mind. The sellers need to keep an open mind. And again, it always comes down to, like we talked about this yesterday, Nazar, like and Brandon even brought it up. It's just like the fridge and the washer and dryer. Like I've got clients that are like, I'm taking my washer and dryer are brand new. I just bought them. I'm taking them to my new house. And then we get an offer that's $100,000 above asking price and they want the washer and dryer. And my seller's like, well, geez, with that number, they can have my washer and dryer. Well, it's the same thing with the commission, right? It would be short-sighted for a seller to say, or a listing agent to pre-negotiate a 2% offering. And then another agent, a buyer's agent, submits an offer that's unbelievable. And they're asking for 3%. And the seller goes, no, I'm only paying 2. Well, gosh, for that offer, I'll pay 3. Right. So I think it comes down to many factors. And if everyone keeps an open mind and stays reasonable around it, at the end of the day, it's still, what am I walking away with? I don't care how much I pay you. I just want to know what I'm walking away with.
So Robert, I appreciate what you're saying. The challenge that I have with that mindset is that you are setting your buyers up for massive disappointment. Because if you tell them, hey, I'm going to charge you 10%. That's my fee in representing you and buying your next home. But don't worry, most of these sellers will cover most of it. And what if you can't get that? What if the offer that you're making is on a home that is not going to offer that? Then you have to go back with your tail between your legs and tell the buyer, hey, I'm sorry, but I can get your offer accepted, but they're not willing to pay the 10%.
Well, there's no guarantees in this business. I'm not guaranteeing anything, right? It's the, hey, this is what we're shooting for. If it doesn't happen, we'll connect and we'll re-strategize. And
so Robert, why then, like, wouldn't it make more sense to then put our fee inclusive with all of the other expenses that a buyer has?
Our fee is 3 times more than all the other fees combined.
That is not true.
It is. Our closing costs on the buy side are 1%. Our fee is 3% or 2.5%. Okay. So when you're dealing with a $3 million purchase and you have $30,000 in closing costs and you tell that buyer they need to pay another $80,000 to $90,000 to cover our fee, when affordability is already very challenging, puts pressure on them, right? So I'm not saying that they're not going to pay the fee, but I'm saying that you can't just have a one size, like, hey, this is it, this is my fee, and if the seller's not going to pay it, you owe it to me. Like, I think this is everything's going to be a case-by-case basis. Every seller is going to be different. Every buyer is going to be different. I think we need to negotiate. I think we all need to keep an open mind around how it's going to happen. And I'm already preparing myself for the non-represented buyer conversation, where the buyer comes in and says, look, I love you. I want to work with you. You were referred to me by X. You helped my family buy this many properties. I don't have the money to pay your fee. And this is the house I have to buy. So I'm either going to do it for free or I'm going to release them and let them work with the listing agent, right? I'm already preparing for things like that to happen. So I think everybody, look, we don't know how it's going to shake out, but like I said, I don't think there's a one size fits all with this.
I'm trying to figure out a way to be able to articulate this in a way that will, not frustrate anybody, but at the same time, get the message across. Like when you are telling me that the fee that you charge is going to be paid by the seller, and you go into an environment where you make an offer on a property and it is not going to get accepted because of what you're asking, or if the offer that you're making is going to be accepted, but they're not going to pay that, or if they say that, yeah, the seller is willing to pay 2% and my fee's 2.5%, and so you're gonna have to eat that additional half a percent. Like, I understand that what you're saying, that your fees whatever percent and the closing costs are less than that, but at the end of the day, Robert, it's all an expense that a buyer has, right? And their down payment is even more than that. And so at the end of the day, are you really, like, is it really an expense that you're trying to get them to pay you? Because from the seller's perspective, like, if they're going to offer you 3%, then that means that they would have offered the buyer 3%. If they're going to offer you 2%, then they would have easily taken 2% less on the purchase price of the home if they didn't have to pay you anything. It's like it's all the same. Like you even said it, at the end of the day, it's what the bottom line is, what the seller's going to net. And so if you say, hey, we've been able to earmark this particular amount of money that the seller has to you, and paying me, that's great. But then we go back to the whole loophole of why we don't do that anymore. We go back to the conversation of this home is paying 3% commission, this home is paying 2%, and this home is paying 5% because they're really motivated. And now you as a buyer's agent are going to be like super motivated to sell that home that's paying 5% because you're more motivated because it's going to offer you more money. But that's not benefiting the buyer at all, right? It's swaying you in a direction that's you're steering your clients and doing what's best for you, not for them. That's why we're in this mess. So I don't know why we'd want to separate those expenses because it's still an expense that someone has to incur, irrelevant of if it's hard for them or not. Because if it's hard for them and they can't afford it, then they can't buy a house. Or they're gonna have to buy the home that is not great and the seller is willing to do whatever they can to be able to make it happen. Jessica.
I think, yes, every situation is different, but I think that you starting from the same place every time is beneficial because when we get to the place that the situation is different, it might be that particular house, and then we might need to modify some things, but I don't think you need to talk about modifying it up front. And I like Nazar's idea of, from somebody that has been doing this, putting it all together. And then the other thing I think is, and our agents, when they come on with us, it's like this too, because nobody in our area is used to having the buyer cover the difference in the fees. So when I say this is how we do it, everyone's like, no buyer's going to pay that. No buyer's going to pay that. And it's a drunk monkey on our shoulder, and it's overthinking on our part, because 9 times out of 10, even more than that, the buyers, if you have a good consultation, the buyer will say that makes sense, because I say, does that sound fair on my consultation? And they say, yes, it's fine. And it's like the agents are scared of something that is not even coming up.
Yeah. Before we get to Tammy, just think of it this way as well. If, when you're representing a buyer, when you're talking to a buyer about what your expenses are, and again, it's all the same to the seller. And so if you go to the seller and you say, hey, Mr. Seller, we are not willing to take anything. We don't need compensation. We don't need any concessions at all. We're willing to offer you this, right? And if they don't need it, like the price of the home is going to be dropped by that, right? And Robin's already gone, so there's no point arguing that. Tammy.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute. I mean, I'm going back to what I said, a while ago, which is, I feel like if we meet with our buyer, it's, what is it that you need as far as in order to purchase a home? Where are you at financially? So you know where they're at. What do they need? I mean, how much money are they got to invest in a property? We've asked that for, years. You're looking at a house, just curious, how much do you have in order to invest into purchasing your home? That way you're going to know, and they're going to know, just like working a net sheet up from a lender. Here's the possible expenses. How much, are you prepared to invest in the property? And it's just all one big number. It doesn't have to be separated out, that this much is for the concessions to compensate me, and this is for your closing costs and down payment. They just need to know how much they need totally, including what they're signing an agreement for you, so that they know if they've got enough funds in the event they had to have that going forward. They may choose to not look at a particular home if, they're saying, no, I just can't make that happen. I don't have enough funds. I need a grant program. I need, I need a gift. We need to make sure we're helping them know what their options are. If they're coming into you, they just don't have enough for their bottom line number. That's
listen, if you I guess it doesn't matter. If you are buying, you're in the market for a purse and you go into a Louis Vuitton store or a Prada store and you're like, wow, that's really pretty. And they show you the price and you're like, holy mother. And you can't afford it. What are you going to do? You're muted again. You can't buy it.
I have something else.
You're going to have to go buy a Coach bag
Mm-hmm.
or go to Target, right? If that's what you can afford. Or, get a sugar daddy, sugar mama to go buy it for you. Like, it works the same way. There's no free lunch, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to come from one pocket, it's going to go into another, and vice versa. Like, it's just a check and balances here. It's supply and demand, and then you equate all the expenses that go on top of it, and you have to, that's what we get paid the big bucks for. We get paid the big bucks to figure all this out and make it make sense and help articulate and share this with everybody so that everyone's on the same page of what's happening.
If our buyers don't have enough now closing costs, we get them DPA if they qualify. It's, again, that's what I'm saying. It's, you
Yeah.
got to know what they've got to invest. And if there's a possibility, you have to maybe help them get with the lender to see if there's another possibility before they even begin.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, because theoretically they can get a point or two from the lender, right? If they
Yes.
raise their interest
Yes.
rates. So, okay. All right. Hopefully this conversation has gone well, and I apologize if it's a little heated, but I think it's worthwhile to have these type of conversations because it allows us to be able to open our mind to things that are different and are new and another new way of looking at it. But ultimately, I really do believe, and I'm excited about two things. One is that full transparency is in full gear, and I love that. And number two, you as a buyer's agent are no longer at the whim of the seller or a listing agent. You get to call what your expenses are, what your fee, what your fee is, and you get to charge that and know exactly what you're going to get. So thank you so much for being here. We'll talk to you guys next masterclass. So you guys have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.